So my friend just dropped out of a particularly hellish D&D campaign. I can't remember all the details at the moment, and you'll never believe what kind of player took her place. This particular player was a Warforged, but, mind you, this was no ordinary Warforged. It was, I crap you not, tank Icicade into the body of a Warforged, complete with a ridiculous German accent. And the worst part was, since it was a tank, it had its arms constantly raised in a way that resembled, when the DM asked the problem player what was going on, he said he was not just interested in their tanks, and started quoting Call of Duty. I hope to God he gets kicked out. How do you even end the sentence? I'm just interested in blank. Where do you even go that leads to a happy, fun D&D game environment? You don't. This story happened in an online game I played in Roll20. The group was really nice as a whole, and the DM was great, but no group is perfect, and our problem player came in the guise of our fighter. See, our supposed lawful good fighter's player had taken the knight background and had chosen to have a squire. Problem was, he would bully his squire relentlessly, to the point of it being abuse. I'm talking insulting him, eating his rations, slapping him upside the head randomly, making him sleep outside, making him carry all his things, etc. But the worst part is that every time Fighter would do something like that to his squire, he would laugh and grin at the rest of us. We were playing with webcams on, as though he had made a hilarious joke and expected us to laugh with him whenever he did. Our characters would do what we could to be nice to his squire, but Fighter would get real angry when we did this, saying that only he could interact with him because it was his squire. This bullying made us all a little uncomfortable, and we called him out on it both in and out of character, asking him to stop, but he'd just say that it was just a joke, just a game, and his character was good aligned, so it made it okay, somehow. He'd lay off the bullying for a couple of sessions whenever we call him out, albeit whining that he guessed he wasn't allowed to play his character anymore, but it would always start up again later. All of the rest of us players agreed that if it happened again, we would take action against him in character. One session, after we'd spent the previous 3 exploring some ancient ruins, Fighter had acquired a flame-tongue sword, which had been identified by our wizard. Fighter immediately says, as we exit the ruins, that he wants to test the new weapon on his squire? At once, all of our characters tell him that anything he did to his squire, we'd do to him back. Fighter whines out of character, saying, "It's just a joke, let me play my character," but we're insistent. Fighter then switched in character and says we're all jealous. He's a noble and we're not, and then challenges any of us to duel him to the death for his squire, saying, "That way it's fair and you guys aren't ganging up on me." This wasn't fair, since most of us are squishy casters and knew we wouldn't be able to take him on one-on-one, especially since he'd acquired a powerful weapon just now, and he knew that. It was an attempt to intimidate us. Our group's paladin, however, immediately just attacks the fighter. The exchange went something like this. "What the hell? Why are you attacking me?" "I'm not attacking you," he points at the squire. "I'm defending him." What followed was our lawful good paladin almost dying in the process, but laying the smackdown on our lawful good fighter and knocking him unconscious. Fighter freaks out, turns off his webcam and saying, "It wasn't fair, we were bullying him!" Yes, he of all people was the one to say that. He didn't have to give away his squire because they hadn't shook on it yet, while also demanding the DM retcon what just happened. When none of us budge, he simply swears at all of us and leaves the game. The squire goes on to become the paladin squire and eventually a full-out statted NPC who took the same oath of devotion that the paladin did. TLDR, Fighter bullies his NPC squire and gets mad when we don't like it. I'm sure verbally and physically abusing your entry-level employees is somebody's sense of humor. However, it's clearly not this D&D group's sense of humor, and therefore you probably shouldn't do it. Like I've said many times, the only way to play D&D wrong is if people are not having a good time. And if you're making your group uncomfortable, well, that's one way to make sure they're not having a good time. And if what you're doing makes no sense for the character, I mean seriously, are lawful good fighters just going to go around bullying people? Then, well, the party has a right to respond in character appropriately as well. The part of the story that really got me was the whole, "You can't take away my squire, we didn't shake hands on it before the fight." I mean, that's just desperation at its finest. But without further ado, next story. The characters: the mom, wizard, mom's best friend, fighter, mom's son, and me, yours truly. To preface, I am not making fun of Fighter. He's just a little kid and can't help the way he was raised. I can, however, make fun of the adults in the story, since they fully deserve it for acting like kids. If you haven't read my previous stories, you should know that before the pandemic hit, I used to DM at a local game store. The owner is a really good friend of mine. Don't get me wrong, I had a ton of fun playing there, and I met a lot of people that I'm still friends with to this day. But I also had a few bad encounters, this being one of them. So 6 months after I started DMing, I decided on running Ghosts of Saltmarsh at the store. The owner's wife approached me one day and told me that a 13-year-old kid wanted to play D&D, but along with the kid also came his mom. She was there to just see if this wouldn't be too violent for the little guy. The kid henceforth shall be known as the Fighter, since that was his preferred class. Well, let's just say the violence did not come from my end. We played the first adventure of Saltmarsh. Fighter ran around the place trying to decapitate a lot of NPCs in the dungeon. He also tried to torture one for information. All the while, his mom just sat next to him, not wanting to play at the table even though I invited her to. When people got visibly uncomfortable, she proclaimed to the group, "Let the boy have his fun." The session ended and I had to cancel the next one due to a family emergency, and since 90% of my regular players were on vacation during the time of my return, I decided to do a beginner's event where we played Lost Mines of Phandelver. A few weeks pass and the event rolls around. If you want to take part in the event, you had to write your name on a sheet in the store. On the day of the event, Fighter and his mom appeared, and they wanted to play the campaign. At this point, all of the spots in the campaign were taken. I politely told them that they still have a place in my Saltmarsh campaign and they can return next week. Fighter and his mom started crying and I felt insanely uncomfortable, so I let them play. This is also where I find out that one of the players at the event, Wizard, is actually Mom's best friend. The other weird coincidence was that one of my Saltmarsh players lived directly above the mom, so we sat around a table with 8 players. I hadn't prepared any more character sheets, so 2 characters were played by 2 people each. And again, the Fighter was a complete edgelord. He was playing a lawful good character, by the way. He started by cutting off the module's goblin's ears, but it got a little better after I took him aside and explained roleplay to him. He was still a little stingy with loot though. Even though it was a little chaotic, it was fun, so I decided to finish Lost Mines of Phandelver on my own time with this group. 2 players dropped out after session 1, so it all ended up working out in terms of space. We played 2 more sessions. I offered to create a character for the mom. She declined though. She said that she just wanted to sit, listen, and take notes for the group. But since this was during the time I was still in college, I always had a bunch of term papers due at the end of the semester. At around this time, I always told the owner that I'll put D&D stuff on hold. So September rolls around and I tell everyone at the store that I will be taking September off. Without even batting an eye, the mom went upstairs to my other Saltmarsh player and told him that I refused to DM anymore, and asked him if he could DM the module for the group. I only found out about it because my player jokingly texted me about it. At this point, I'm kind of fuming. I got into a huge fight with the mom about it. She apologized after a while, and since I was a big softy back, I forgave her. Everything went without a hitch until we finished the campaign. The group had a lot of fun playing with me, so they asked if I wanted to DM another campaign for them, to which I agreed. We decided on starting with Dragon of Icespire Peak and would go on to Storm King's Thunder. This is where the second part and the next part of the trouble begins. Since we finished Lost Mines of Phandelver a week before Christmas, we planned on a get-together for the entire group. A little bit like a Christmas party. This was also during the week my dad came for a visit. He lives on the other side of the country, so I barely get to see him. We all agree on hanging out at a bar and having a few. I told them I would bring my dad along since he doesn't get out that much. Every last member of the group canceled, but not by themselves. Apparently, they all called the mom to cancel, and not me, whose idea this was to set up the whole thing. This was meant to take place on Saturdays, since on Sunday I would take a car ride with my dad to be home for Christmas. The mom used the group chat to organize a separate meeting on Monday, fully knowing that I, the DM, was not in town for it. It might sound petty now, but remember this for later. Okay, that really stung. But I chalked it up to coincidence. Where it all came downhill was the session 0 for the next campaign. The mom's best friend Wizard was still part of the group. He tried to power game and send me builds upon builds for his next character, telling me how awesome they were. Then, after a lot of back and forth, he decided to play a bard, a changeling bard, in the Forgotten Realms setting. Also, he wanted his starting equipment to be a double scimitar, double-bladed quarterstaff, and mithril armor. After that, I got so annoyed, I just told him to use the stuff from the player's handbook, or just get lost. Time for Session 0. Usually I only use standard array for character creation, and this was definitely one of the reasons I still do that. But since this was my home game, I told the players they could either come to the store on Wednesdays before my campaign or wait until Session 0 to roll their stats. And it worked out for 4 out of 6 players. Again, the wizard was insanely annoying. He tried to record a video of himself rolling out his stats and sent it to me via Discord instead. I told him just to wait for the Session 0. The fighter, the kid, was the one who just could not wait. He just rolled his stats anyway, and what a quinky dink. He rolled 3 18s. I told him he couldn't use them since I wasn't there when they were rolled. The mom was like, but I was around when he rolled, and that should be enough. I let fighter roll new stats, which still had 2 17s and no stat under 14 in it. The kid still got pissed, slammed the door, and cried his eyes out. The mom looked at me like I was some villain. This kid's 13? During this awkward situation, I also let slip that Wizard wanted to play a changeling. After the session, he sent me a passive-aggressive text on WhatsApp stating, I hope no one heard that. That was supposed to be a secret. I wanted to play a new race every session. I decided I had enough after that, and sent out all my grievances to the group in the form of a voicemail, which included the story about trying to get my players to DM, the Christmas story, and the Session 0 fiasco. And then the mom texted me. We agreed on meeting up at a bar to talk it out. She told me she was flabbergasted about my voicemail. She insisted that she only tried to force another player to be DM because I said I refused to DM for them anymore, which I told her was not true. She insisted that that was what she wrote in the Discord. I pulled out my phone and proved her wrong. Her response was just, oh. Then I confronted her about the Christmas story. Her justification? After work, she just wanted to get a good buzz going, and she told me I shouldn't be mad because maybe the group are not the good friends you thought we were. This was the moment where I just showed throwing my drink in her face, to be honest. Oh, and this was also the time for term papers again, so no matter what, I had to take a D&D break. So when the mom asked me if I wanted to return, she said that I should do it right now or not at all. Because if you don't want to, it'll ruin your relationship with people that care deeply about you. She also told me I embarrassed her kid in my voicemail and I should apologize to him. After that, I decided to not return at all. Then she tried to pull at my heartstrings. I didn't get to play at all, and now I have to DM. Funny story coming from someone who got offered to play in the last campaign and refused. I also told her that if her wizard friend is so obsessed with the game, he should DM. Her answer? That's not gonna happen. I decided to leave it at that and left. They tried to run Essentials Kit without me. I left the group chat the same weekend. A few weeks later, she came into the local game store with her kid, the fighter. He looked at me dead in the eyes and tried to give me the stink eye. Mom went up to me, rudely interrupting a conversation I had with a friend. I was really kind of pissed because of that and barely even acknowledged her existence. After she left the store, she texted me on WhatsApp saying I was being rude and crappy and that if I had a problem with her, I should just leave the group chat. And then she realized I had already left the group chat, and so she just deleted the entire message. A few weeks later, the virus started. She came into the store and complained about how hard DMing was, and apparently after 2 or 3 sessions, the group disbanded. That is where the story of the mom ends. Her friend the wizard was still in my store campaign. Since again, this was during term paper time, the entire thing was still on hold. But I still ran Descent into Avernus since this was pretty railroaded in terms of campaign, and it was easy for me to prep. So Wizard texted in the group chat why I was still running the Descent into Avernus campaign. I told him my reason, to which he just replied, "You can tell me if you don't want to play with me anymore." That was partially true. The day after that, he went bananas and sent this message into the other group chat of the campaign. "Since I am now groupless, I am looking for a spot as a player. Do any of you have an opening?" I just decided to block him and the mom for good measure. Wizard actually managed to find a group afterwards, weirdly enough in a campaign ran by a power gamer from the last story that I wrote, but he got kicked out for hitting on the power gamer's girlfriend. Wizard is married, by the way. This Karen-filled, pixie-cut coverage story was already bonkers as is, but we have attempted infidelity for the ending. You'll love to see it. Guys, always remember that your DM is also a person with their own stuff going on. And while I understand, I totally get that losing D&D can be, well, rather, saddening. It can be sad to lose your D&D campaign that weekend. But your DM does need some time. DMs are people. They've got their own stuff going on, and running a game can be very taxing. So make sure to give them some space if they need to work on homework, study up for a test, or get work done for their professional life. I don't believe Karening all over the place is going to do anything for your DM, nor will it do anything for your campaign, but I think most people already know that. Respect your DMs, people. It's a great way to ensure that your campaign thrives. This is my first time writing here, so I apologize if this is a bit rough. Quick summary of the overall game. Narrative, loose-only war game that made a rough transition to Dark Heresy 2. Now, on to the good stuff. After feeding us almost nothing but combat missions, we all were hoping for a little more investigation given the switch over from Only War to Dark Heresy, we finally got it. An overly zealous Inquisitor had determined that the guardsmen on a particular planetary warfront were heretics, and they were determined to be worthy of only destruction. We were being sent to ensure that any remnants of heresy were removed and that there were no survivors left. Only that these orders were completely and utterly insane. We were being sent to do a job that, as an Inquisitor, this guy had the power to do from orbit, especially given that we were a 5 to 10 man team of randos with nowhere near the firepower to take out a multi-regiment front. We decided to scrap these orders on the way down and do what the Inquisition was meant to do. Inquisit. We were all in agreement and set off to do our thing. The soldiers would soldier, the nerds would nerd, and we had a solid basis for what we believed would be a fruitful investigation. My character had found out from the commander of the front that there was a planned invasion happening on one of the coastlines that was currently contested. Pillboxes, AT guns, AA emplacements, the whole ordeal. Our group had also found out that there had been multiple cases of sabotage around the base, stuff that made us all on edge. We all decided that whoever was behind this would likely spring a trap during the planned invasion. It seemed like too much of an obvious plot hook to miss. Another very important note here. While my character was talking to the command staff, he understood the plan was to target the AT guns and the AA emplacements, anti-tank and anti-air, in case you don't know, to allow for both ground and air assets to be put to use in battle. This is extremely important and will be relevant shortly, so we go to our respective bunkers and plan for another day tomorrow. And then we're suddenly on boats, going to the beach a la Saving Private Ryan style. No investigating, no warning, just forcing every one of our characters onto this beachfront invasion, including the investigation types who have exactly zero business attacking any beaches. Upon entering a nearby bunker, we were ambushed by a Necron Wraith? I can't explain all of what it is here, the point being it was something very powerful that was not hinted towards at all during our time there. It nearly kills us outright, and then we manage to escape after several of us go down. As we evac up to the transport, we all get to watch as a literal Necron warship breaches out of the crust and the scene fades to black? Yes, as it turns out, it was alien robot Egyptians all along, and trust me, it only gets worse from here. While the other players were naturally very disappointed with the fact what was promised to be an actual investigation turned out to be another combat slugfest, the DM was unloading in a chat reserved for some other DMs and those of us who helped in the various games. He proceeded to call the players complete idiots, going on and on about how it's our fault for the way the game turned out, and most important of all his points, he said we fabricated the entire objective of taking out the anti-air emplacements? Normally, I could take a few hits, but something snapped in me that day, and I was not willing to take it lying down. I proceeded to, at the moment, calmly explain to him that the objective was given to us by him, and that he was accusing us of following the plot he set out for us. He then denied it completely, saying that he never said that in any way, shape, or form. I replied by sending a screenshot of the exact message in-game of the moment he said that, after asking him to confirm that statement, and his response, "I can't be bothered to remember every little thing I put down for you guys." Needless to say, I lost any and all composure I had been maintaining at that point and let him have it. It's one thing to be unhappy with how your game turns out, but to actively insult your players for something you did and then claim that defense when called out, he got to throw his fit. I didn't let off until rage simmered to outright disdain, and I left the group before he had the satisfaction of banning me. This is a great example of DMs and players just not knowing what kind of game they're playing. Look, it's the DM's responsibility to tell the players what kind of game this is going to be, because clearly the players expected something a bit more roleplay and investigation-like, and the DM wanted a straight-up combat fest. You guys can play the game however you want, however, everyone needs to be on board. And also, write down your quest hooks, write down what you're having your players do, take notes as DM, because seriously, forgetting your own quests, that's just, well, that's really bad. The game kind of hinges on the DM or GM knowing what they're doing, and if your DM or GM doesn't know what's going on, well, you're gonna have a very confusing game. So I made a post 2 years ago that I created a gay bard on r/D&D. Well, after a year rolled around, I finally found the perfect place to use him. But as you can tell by this being an RPG horror story, he was not received well. Our party consisted of 4 other people: DM, Elven Druid, Gnome Wizard, and the Problem Player, a Warforged Barbarian. We played in a classic style D&D campaign, delving into dungeons and attacking whatever attacked us. Except for a Barbarian, the first red flag that basically described the entire incident was him saying in Session 0, "I designed him to be a killing machine." And because of how naive we all were, everyone but the DM and Barbarian being quite new, the game just started. First 10 minutes, and he started a bar fight that our characters were forced into, and after escaping with our lives, Barbarian does act normal for a bit. Yes, he did plow through a dungeon like a lawnmower with grass, but he didn't commit any war crimes or burn down orphanages. And then it happened. We had just received a quest that involved killing each of the 7 deadly sins, and when we had reached the 4th one, lust, the DM decided to pass the spotlight to my gay bard by summoning beautiful women to distract the rest of the party. I obviously proclaim my character is gay, and nothing happens except a few distasteful and rude comments towards my character, until after a session, when we had finally beaten lust. Barbarian texts me, saying, "Bro, your character can't be gay, that's weird." I reply saying, "Why not?" He spat, "Well, everyone in the party's a man, so it's disgusting." I pipe back, saying, "I never showed my bard thinking of any of the party as his type." "Being gay is rude and disgusting if you aren't gay in real life." It's mostly just back and forth that for a few minutes before he shuts up and stops arguing with me. Day after the next session, both Druid and Wizard text me something along the lines of, "Why is Barbarian angry with you?" To which I explain what happened, show a few screenshots, etc. Session 3 starts, and Barbarian immediately starts showing hatred towards my bard, which ends up lasting an hour or 2 of him just being an ass to the rest of the party, and them siding with me. And in great Edgelord murder hobo fashion, while we're at camp and everyone is asleep, he tries to kill a party member, aka Bard, aka me. Thank God for the 2 times he rolled, he didn't get above a 7, and before he could roll again, Wizard already had Fireball ready, and Druid was prepared to blow a dart into his face. He then screams, out of character, that a sleeping player character shouldn't have an armor class over 5. He rolled a 5 and 7, by the way. Mine was 10. Why? Because the DM had played with this guy before in the party, and he probably realized that this guy would go murder hobo on the party and try to kill him. So this was the best he could do to slightly hinder that. Doesn't make much sense, but I'm not complaining. Anyway, back to the story. Murder Hobo gets restrained and starts arguing with the Wizard and the DM out of character. The session ends quickly after that, and here comes the best part of the story. Buckle up. From what I've gathered from Wizard, Druid, and DM, Barbarian tries to get DM on his side to kick me because he's weird. After DM rejects due to 0 actual reasoning and him being an ass, he then tries to get Wizard and Druid on his side. Then, when Druid said that he's bisexual in real life, Barbarian went into a tantrum rampage, screaming homophobic slurs and racist comments. So not only was this guy acting homophobic, but racist too! Wizard then gives him a good talking to, as in Wizard lists the amount of problems Barbarian has caused, looked at the DM to give him the boot, and the DM agreed. We all blocked him as soon as we could, and thankfully had a great rest of the campaign, in which DM let us salvage the NPC version of Barbarian's body as armor, which the Wizard kept most of. My Bard and Druid got some pretty neat stuff too. TLDR, Homophobic and racist murder hobo is angry that my bard is gay, tries to kill him, fails, goes to insult a poor player that disagrees, and then gets the boot. According to this barbarian, as a DM, all of my NPCs must be Asian asexual men, and that's about it. Otherwise, I am rude and disgusting for playing characters that aren't like me. What a wonderful way to create an interesting and diverse world for my players to interact with. Yeah, not really. This barbarian's logic does not hold up at all. As long as you are respectful in your portrayal of another type of person, then I think it should be fine. Being respectful should be on your list of priorities when playing a character that isn't like you, but as long as you adhere to that and make sure that everyone at the table is also comfortable with this character and you're comfortable playing them and everyone's having a good time, then go have your fun. A big part of these fantasy games, these tabletop role-playing games, is playing characters that aren't like us. And, well, it's a very unfortunate thing that this barbarian completely misses out on that. Alright, with those out of the way, I believe it is time to wrap up this episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like to let me know. If you want to see more of my content, I also have a podcast where I interview fellow D&D content creators. If you want to check that out, it is on my channel under Roll for Insight. And also subscribe to see more of our videos. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, then go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, "Mom," to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.